Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into the first book of the Bible, Genesis. We'll explore its key stories, themes, and even answer some important questions. Have you ever wondered what the Garden of Eden was like, or how the world began? Whether you're familiar with Genesis or hearing about it for the first time, this video will give you a clear and simple summary. And be sure to stick around until the end, where we'll answer 6 big questions about Genesis, including what it tells us about God and even where the Garden of Eden might be located today. You won't want to miss it. Genesis is the very first book of the Bible and sets the stage for everything that comes after. It's made up of 50 chapters and tells the story of creation, humanity's beginnings, and God's relationship with people. Traditionally, the book of Genesis is believed to have been written by Moses around 1400 to 1500 BC, during the time when the Israelites were in the wilderness. It's divided into 2 main parts. Chapters 1 to 11 talk about the creation of the world and early humanity, while chapters 12 to 50 focus on the family of Abraham and the beginnings of the nation of Israel. Let's take a closer look at these stories. The Bible begins with an incredible story of God creating everything in the universe. It all starts when God speaks and light appears, separating day from night. This is just the beginning. God continues his work day by day. On the second day, he creates the sky to separate the waters above and below. On the third day, God gathers the waters so that dry land appears, and he fills it with plants and trees, creating a beautiful, fruitful earth. Each day, God's creation becomes more detailed and vibrant. On the fourth day, he places the sun, moon, and stars in the sky, giving light to the earth and marking seasons and time. On the fifth day, God fills the seas with fish and the sky with birds, each according to its kind. It's amazing to think of the variety and detail God put into every creature, from the tiniest fish to the grandest bird. Then, on the 6th day, God creates animals of every kind, wild and tame, small and large. Finally, he creates human beings in his image. Adam and Eve are given a special place in creation, and God blesses them, telling them to be fruitful, multiply, and take care of the earth. But the 7th day is different. God rests, and this establishes the idea of the Sabbath, a time set aside for rest and reflection. This pattern of work and rest becomes important throughout the Bible and shows us that rest is a part of God's design for life. Genesis tells us that everything God made was good, showing his love and care for his creation. In chapters 3 and 4, we see the turning point in the story. Adam and Eve live in the Garden of Eden, a paradise where they have everything they need. But God gives them one command: not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. One day, a serpent tempts Eve, telling her that eating the fruit will make her like God. She eats it and gives some to Adam. This act of disobedience is called the fall because it introduces sin into the world, breaking the perfect relationship between God and humanity. As a result, Adam and Eve realize they are naked and feel ashamed. God confronts them, and they are expelled from the garden, which is a heartbreaking moment showing the consequences of sin. The story continues with their sons, Cain and Abel. Cain, the older brother, becomes jealous of Abel when God accepts Abel's offering, but not his. Instead of dealing with his jealousy, Cain lets his anger grow, and he kills Abel. This shows how sin spreads quickly from Adam and Eve to their children, leading to violence and pain. Even in this, though, God shows mercy by protecting Cain from being harmed by others, showing that despite sin, God's grace is still present. In chapters 5 to 9, as generations pass, humanity becomes more corrupt and violent. Genesis tells us that people's thoughts were only evil all the time. God decides to reset creation by sending a great flood. but he finds one righteous man, Noah, and instructs him to build an ark to save his family and pairs of every kind of animal. Imagine the scene: a massive boat, animals of all shapes and sizes, and a family preparing for this huge storm. The floodwaters rise and cover the earth, wiping out everything else. Noah and his family stay in the ark for over a year, waiting for the waters to go down. When they finally come out, God makes a covenant with Noah, promising never to destroy the world with a flood again. The rainbow becomes the sign of this promise. This story shows God's justice, but also his faithfulness to preserve life and give humanity a new start. After the flood, in chapters 10 to 11, Noah's descendants begin to spread across the earth. But soon they come together to build a massive city and a tower called Babel. They want to make a name for themselves and reach the heavens, showing their pride and independence from God. In response, God confuses their language, making it impossible for them to communicate and finish the tower. The people scatter all over the world, and different languages and cultures are formed. This story shows how pride leads people away from God's plans, but it also explains the diversity we see in languages and cultures today. The next major section of Genesis, chapters 12 to 25, shifts to one man, Abraham, originally called Abram. God calls him to leave his home and promises to make him into a great nation, bless him, and through him bless the entire world. Abraham obeys, showing great faith. He travels to the land God shows him, Canaan, and God makes a covenant with him, which is an unbreakable promise. Even though Abraham and his wife Sarah are old and have no children, God promises them a son. This promise takes years to come true, and they face tests of faith along the way. At one point, Sarah suggests they have a child through her servant Hagar, and Ishmael is born. But this wasn't God's plan. Finally, when Abraham is 100 years old, Sarah gives birth to Isaac, the child of promise. Later, God tests Abraham's faith again by asking him to sacrifice Isaac. It's a shocking request, but Abraham trusts God, believing that God could even raise Isaac from the dead if necessary. Just as Abraham is about to go through with it, God stops him and provides a ram as a substitute. This story shows both Abraham's faith and God's provision, and it foreshadows how God would later provide Jesus as a sacrifice for sin. Chapters 26 to 36 continues with Isaac, Abraham's son, and then focuses on Jacob, Isaac's son. Jacob's life is filled with twists and turns. He tricks his brother Esau out of his birthright and blessing, which causes family conflict. Jacob then flees to his uncle Laban's house, where he works for many years, and marries Leah and Rachel. God blesses Jacob with 12 sons, who become the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. But Jacob's journey isn't easy. He has a powerful encounter with God, where he wrestles with an angel all night. At the end, he is given a new name, Israel, which means one who struggles with God. This name becomes important as it reflects the ongoing relationship between God and his people, who would be called the Israelites. The final section of Genesis tells the dramatic story of Joseph, one of Jacob's 12 sons. Joseph is his father's favorite, and this causes his brothers to become jealous. They sell him into slavery in Egypt, and Joseph goes through many hardships, including being falsely accused and imprisoned. But Joseph never loses faith. God is with him, and through these trials, Joseph rises to become a powerful leader in Egypt. When a famine strikes, Joseph's brothers come to Egypt seeking food, not knowing Joseph is now in charge. Joseph tests their character, and when he sees they have changed, he reveals himself. The family is reunited, and Joseph explains that what they meant for harm, God used for good. This story highlights how God's plans can bring hope and restoration, even in the darkest situations. Genesis is a powerful book that tells us about the origins of the world and humanity, but it also reveals much about God and his plans for us. Now let's dive into some important questions. 1. Why did God create the world in 7 days? What does this mean? The 7 days of creation show that God is orderly and has a purpose for everything. Each day, He adds something new, building on what was made before. By taking 6 days to create and resting on the 7th day, God sets an example for people. Work for 6 days, then rest on the 7th. This pattern of work and rest became important later on, especially for the Israelites, when they observed the Sabbath day as a time of rest and worship. It reminds us that rest is part of a healthy and balanced life. 2. Where would the Garden of Eden be located if it were on today's map? The exact location of the Garden of Eden is unknown. However, Genesis mentions it being near 4 rivers, the Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates. The Tigris and Euphrates still exist today, and they flow through modern-day Iraq. Some scholars think the garden might have been in that area, perhaps near the Persian Gulf or even farther north in Turkey. But the other 2 rivers, Pishon and Gihon, aren't known today, so we can't be sure of the exact spot. 3. What does the word Genesis mean, and what's its significance in Hebrew? The word Genesis comes from the Greek word meaning origin or beginning. It perfectly describes what the book is about, the beginning of everything, the world, human beings, sin, and God's plan for humanity. In Hebrew, the book is called Bereshit, which means in the beginning. This phrase is also the very first line of the book, showing that Genesis is all about the start of life, the earth, and God's relationship with people. 4. What does Genesis teach us about God? Genesis shows that God is the creator of everything. It highlights His power. He simply speaks, and things come into existence. But Genesis also reveals that God is personal and caring. He creates humans in His image, giving them a special place in creation. He walks with Adam and Eve in the garden, showing He desires a close relationship with people. Even when humans disobey Him, God shows mercy, like when He clothes Adam and Eve, or protects Cain after he kills Abel. Genesis reveals that God is both just and loving. 5. Why is the book of Genesis so important? Genesis is the foundation of the entire Bible. It explains where everything comes from and introduces key ideas like God's role as creator, the beginning of sin, and the promise of God's blessing through Abraham's family. It's the start of the story that continues through the rest of the Bible, leading to the coming of Jesus. Without Genesis, we wouldn't understand the origins of humanity, why the world is the way it is, or how God plans to fix the brokenness in the world. 6. How does Genesis hint at Jesus, even though He isn't named? While Jesus' name isn't mentioned in Genesis, there are clues that point to Him. One example is in Genesis 3:15, where God tells the serpent that the offspring of the woman will crush its head. This is seen as a prophecy about Jesus, who would come to defeat sin and evil. Another hint is in God's promise to Abraham that all nations will be blessed through his family. Christians believe that this blessing comes through Jesus, a descendant of Abraham, who offers salvation to everyone. These hints show that Genesis is already setting the stage for God's plan through Jesus. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about the Bible, subscribe and let us know in the comments what book of the Bible you'd like to hear about next. See you next time.